Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. A few quick updates. If you haven't checked out episode 8, please do so. The title is Dating Friends and Sleeping with Strangers, a Valentine's Day episode. It's a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who's reached out. The feedback continues to be positive. If you're enjoying Solo, I ask that you do any or all of the following. 1. Rate and review on iTunes. 2. Tell your single friends and family members about the podcast. 3. Try to break up couples so that we can have more listeners. I'm kidding about number 3. Just rate and share with others. Thanks. Good news, I have so much demand that I'm moving to a weekly schedule. Look for the next episode 1 week from today. In this episode, I bring together two friends, Jill Cohen and Julie Nirvelli, to attempt to answer the question, what is a remarkable life? Their thoughts are truly insightful. One of my favorite thoughts is turning an I wish into an I did. I also present a lesson on the science that underlies what makes a life remarkable and present more good news. There's no one path that you need to walk. We finish up with audience questions. How can married people support their solo friends? And what to do when a coworker asks you to cover a shift because you're the single one. If you stick around to the end for the bonus material, I ask for feedback from my guests on some principles for a remarkable life that I've been working on. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Jill Cohen. Jill grew up in Miami, went to Emory University, where she graduated Phi Beta Kappa. She then moved to Boulder and earned an MA in English at the University of Colorado. After that, Jill taught English abroad, taught writing at CU, and eventually became an ER nurse. That's emergency room nurse. She worked in Colorado, Wyoming, California, Florida, and Australia. She's volunteered in Central America and pedaled as a medic on a bicycle tour across Africa. Multiple times?
Yes.
Multiple times. She's currently living a remarkable life and traveling the world, 25 countries and counting, supporting herself as a traveling nurse. Welcome, Jill.
Thanks, Peter.
Today's guest co-host returns from episode 1. Julie Nirvelli was born and raised in San Jose, California, and earned her college degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She's lived in Colorado for 16 years. 15 of those years, she's been my friend. Julie embraces her solo life and looks for opportunities to say yes, try new things, and above all, have fun. Welcome back, Julie.
Thank you for having me, and hello, Jill.
Hi,
Looking
Julie.
forward to our conversation.
Me too.
All right, so what are we going to do today? We are going to attempt to answer a very difficult question, a tough question. What makes a life remarkable? We're also going to do some audience Q&A. And if you stick around for the bonus material, people love the bonus material typically, so no pressure. We're going to discuss some of the guiding principles that I have for solo. I've been working on them. And I'd like to get some feedback from Jill and Julie. You ready to go?
Ready.
All right.
Sounds great.
So, Jill.
Yes.
We met in Boulder due in part to your love of physical activities.
True story.
Tennis, roller skating, snowboarding, swing dance, and fitness instructor.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Peter used to heckle me from
That's not a surprise.
I never thought of it as heckle.
from his mat in the back of the room. I'd be teaching a class and encouraging everybody to brace their core, and then there'd be this joke that came up from the back of the room. And actually, you're right. It wasn't heckling. It was friendly. It was banter.
No, if I remember correctly, at first it didn't seem welcome.
I think it was surprising.
I see.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a non-normative thing to to participate as a
vocally.
I'm a better teacher than I am a student, I think, at this point in my life.
Right. So it was probably hard to rein yourself in.
Yes. I was excited. It was a fun class. It was like a a HIIT class. It was like a high intensity training class before high intensity training was a thing.
True. Yes, exactly. And I think after the first few times, you're right, it was a little jolting at first, but then I think I got accustomed to you and started to enjoy it. Hopefully it came across that way, that eventually I kind of started riffing back and forth, and it became something, Peter, honestly, that I looked forward to in the class.
You're being kind. The fact is, it couldn't have been that bad because you're sitting here 10 plus years later.
Right. I didn't run in the other direction when you asked me to be on this podcast.
So you are also not only living a remarkable life, but you are a solo listener. You have listened to every episode thus far.
Yes, that's true.
So I always think of you as this sort of having these three elements to your, I would say four actually, elements to your life.
Okay.
So one is this physicality,
Uh-huh.
right? You're really fit. Activity is a big part of your life, whether I've never seen you roller skate, but you know what I mean, that kind of thing. But whether it be hiking or snowboarding or whatnot, this part of you as a nurse, your sense of humor, like kind of levity, like, good conversationalist, funny to talk to. And then rolled into it has been you having spent many years in Boulder, now kind of out in the world and using this skill that you have that is not location based, or at least not one location based, to kind of finance and give you opportunities to do that. So
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about especially that last one?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how long you've been doing that and what sparked the idea to get you out of Boulder and on your travels.
Yeah, it's funny how you said, Peter, out of Boulder and out into the world, because we often refer to Boulder as this bubble that's not like the real world, which I've found to be true in my travels. So it's funny because when you asked me to be on this podcast, one of the things I tried to do was I remembered back to the humor code.
Okay.
When you kind of tried to answer the question, what is humor? What makes something funny? And you crystallized it in what I think is this wonderful phrase, humor is a benign violation. So
Someone's done her homework for this thing. Wow.
I'm a total nerd, and I like to be prepared. I didn't get that Phi Beta Kappa from just sitting around. So what I tried to do was the same thing for what is a remarkable life. I tried to crystallize it in a sentence, but I couldn't. I came up with about 7 or 8 sentences. And to bring it back to the question you just asked, one of the sentences I came up with was, being paid to do things you like makes a remarkable life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was one of the sentences I came up with. And so you talk about like the physicality and the nursing. And so what I think I've done is from a very young age, right after I graduated college, of course, you don't have any money when you graduate from college. And I had all these things I wanted to do. I grew up in Miami. I had never been camping. I had never been hiking. I had never been rafting. And I really wanted to. So
Colorado was a good choice.
Colorado was a great choice.
And you chose it over New York City.
I did choose it over New York City. Yeah, that was crazy. I had faxed like a apartment lease for New York. And the fax didn't go through because this was back in the early 90s. Because I was going to go to New York because it had a better reputation as a school. The fax didn't go through. And in that moment, I said to my sister who was sending it, don't send it. I don't want to go to New York. I want to go to Colorado.
So you're saying if it had gone through, you might have had a completely different path in life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Pretty wild.
That is.
And I'm so glad that fax machine malfunctioned in that moment. I don't know. New York might have been fine. It just would have been a different life. Maybe I would have made it to Colorado eventually, but I'm so glad it turned out the way it did. But before I went to grad school, I applied for this job as a counselor on a camping trip with teenagers. I had never been camping before. I asked an Eagle Scout friend of mine from college. I took him out to dinner. I said, if you take me out to dinner, will you tell me all about camping so I can impress this guy in a job interview and get hired to take these kids all through the mountains and the Rockies and lead them on hikes and canoeing and all kinds of stuff, because I really think I can do it. I've never done it before, but I think I can do it. And he wavered for a second. He was like, all right, I guess so. So I got the job and I was terrified because I thought, oh gosh, shit just got real.
Yeah.
Now I have to put up a tent. I've never done that before and pretend I know what I'm doing. So I had a great time on this trip, and I got paid to do something I was really interested in doing and that I knew I would like. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have traveled for 6 weeks through the Rockies of Canada and through Utah and, I think it was Washington, Oregon, California. It was an incredible trip. And I never would have gotten to do that, I guess. One, had I not lied, but two, had I not had this idea of, it would be great to get paid to do something I like to do. And so then that kind of was part of the reason why I became a nurse, because I thought there were things I wanted to do with nursing, but part of it was there's sick and injured people everywhere. Mm-hmm. And if I want to go see the world, which I really do want to do, I could probably get paid to do it as a nurse.
I see.
And so I did wind up going to Australia in 2008 and working there for a year.
Hey, was it then? I remember you doing that. I can't believe it's been that long. Yes.
Yeah, it's been, 12 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it leads to another little sentence that I wrote.
I like how we're already tackling the main question. Go on.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was something about, instead of saying I wish, replace that with I did. And that makes a remarkable life. Instead
Love
of
that.
Oh, thank you. So I heard about a doctor who I was working with who spent 6 months in Australia because I think her husband got a job there, and she said, oh, okay, I guess I'll go over with our family and I'll work there too. And my first thought was, I wish I could do that. And then I thought, wait a second, if I wish I could do that, I don't know, maybe I could. Let me look into it. And I looked into it, and it took about 8 months for it to make it happen, because I had to have like an FBI criminal background check and, get a medical exam. And I had to find my high school transcripts and send those to Australia to prove that I could speak English. And I kind of thought, my gosh, I have a master's in English. That sort of supersedes.
This is just bureaucracy.
It was total bureaucracy. I even sent a microfiche copy of it from the basement of a school in Miami, Florida, because everything is on microfiche from back then. And I sent it to them. It was all fuzzy. And I thought, oh, it's fine. They just need the paper. Nope. Got a letter back from them that said, we can't read it. It's too fuzzy. Yes. You're going to need a note from the principal that you graduated.
Can I interject with a little quick thing? So I have a colleague and friend, Adam Barsky, who was on my other podcast called I'm Not Joking. And Adam is an American living in Melbourne, Australia. He's a professor of organizational behavior management at the University of Melbourne. Mm-hmm. Adam gets all these great things. Like, he finds money for this. He won a teaching award recently, and he's a fine teacher. You'll get that impression if you listen to the podcast. Yeah. But what happens is he just will do the bureaucracy. The reason not that he's not deserving, but he filled out these forms. He wrote this essay. He does these like 12 steps, that are designed to keep people.
Right. Who's the most persistent?
Oh, right.
Yes. Yeah. It's more of a filtering process than
anything else. And so he just is willing to do the admin. Right. And as a result, he gets money to do this thing. He has sponsored me twice as a research scholar there, because he and I are willing to fill out the forms and, check all the boxes and dot all the I's and all the T's.
Yeah.
So.
I think tenacity makes a remarkable life.
Yeah. So you eventually made it to Australia. You turned your I wish into an I did.
Yes, exactly.
And then you were hooked, I'm guessing.
And then I was hooked. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing year. And I did actually come back and work in Boulder for quite some time after that. But the way nursing works, it's so easy to take a lot of time off and travel as a nurse. So even though I was in one place for a long time, I was taking at least month-long trips, 3-week-long trips, a couple times a year, along with week-long, 2-week-long ones here and there. Maybe using every bit of paid time off you have makes a remarkable life.
It does help. Assuming you get it.
Yeah.
So, the average American gets about 2 weeks of vacation. Americans are the third or fourth most hardworking people in the world. Mm-hmm. The Japanese and the Mexicans are higher when it comes to this, but I think Americans are third or fourth. And so, while all of Europe is on holiday in August, Americans are sweating through through their work and maybe taking 2 weeks if they're lucky.
Yeah. It was interesting. In Australia, their work ethic is a lot less intense than the American work ethic as well. Yeah. And somehow they still get everything done.
Yes. It's a work to live culture.
Indeed.
More than live to work.
It was kind of funny when I had my exit interview in Australia. They were looking at my timesheet or the hours or something, and my manager looked at me and said, "So you owe us 1 day of."
How very Australian of you!
Yeah, right.
He said, "I was immersing myself in the culture."
Exactly. It was really funny, and I said, "Oops, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize." And their response was, "That's okay. No worries. It's fine. We made it through the year." And I love that attitude that they approved it. I took the time off because they approved it. I guess I wasn't keeping track of it to the minute, but I loved it that was their response. Don't even worry about it.
Don't worry about it, mate.
Yeah. We want everybody to be happy because happy employees, I think, make a happier work environment. You have longevity. I just really appreciated the way they treated their employees there. It was very nice.
That's great. Well, let's get back to the travel stuff in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll hold off on this. I want to give Julie a chance to, if you have a question for Jill, you better ask it because I'm about to ask you something.
But you want to get back to the traveling later?
Later when we talk.
Okay. Well, my question.
Go ahead. That's good.
Well, I'm curious how. So you said you went back to Boulder for a while, and you just got back from a trip recently. So are you still doing the traveling nurse?
Yeah. So
do you have a home? Is what Julie's asking. Do you have a home, or are you a nomad?
So both. I have a home in Boulder, and it's rented out currently, and I'm working as a travel nurse, and I started doing that about 1.5 years ago. So I quit my job at the hospital in Boulder, and I signed up with an agency. And the way the travel nurse gig works in a nutshell is hospitals around the country sometimes have temporary needs. Like they maybe have someone who's going on maternity leave or having surgery on their leg, and they don't want to hire a whole new full-time person to fill that spot. They just need someone for 3 months. So they seek the agencies. The agency looks at their roster and says, "Oh yeah, we have a couple ER nurses who could fill that role. We'll submit them." And then it has to be that the timing works out for you. You're available when you're needed. You actually want to go to that hospital. The pay package looks good to you. And
it's like a matching process.
It's a match. It's like online dating for work. So
now swipe right on this one.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, swipe left on that hospital.
Yeah.
It's in the inner city of who knows where. Well, that's just me. I think maybe a lot of people do want to work in an inner city, but I've specifically chosen, because I like to be active and get out hiking and all that stuff, I have chosen to live in these small rural hospitals where there's amazing opportunities to have outdoor adventures. So my first travel job was in Lander, Wyoming, which is, if this tells you anything, the headquarters for NOLS, the National Outdoor Leadership School.
I see. Yes. Your people.
Yes. I was united with my people. Yeah. So I worked there for 3 months. And then the next job I got, I feel like I just lucked right into this. Bishop, California, which is in the foothills of the Eastern Sierras. Beautiful place in California, just about a half hour, 45 minutes away from Mammoth Mountain, where it snowed about 4,000 inches last season. So that was a great spot to land. I wound up staying there 6 months because I renewed because I liked it so much. Then I took a hiatus from the travel nursing thing, actually, because you talk about being tenacious and filling out all the paperwork. I had interviewed for this medic job on a bike tour with a totally different company. It's a company called Tour d'Afrique, and they do these long distance bike tours all over the world. And a friend of mine showed it to me, said, "Hey, have you ever seen this website? Would you be interested in doing this?" And I looked at it and I said, "Heck yeah, I would totally be interested in doing that. I wish I could do that." And
and guess who did?
Once again, he never did it.
I see.
But I've been on 2 of them now. And but I had to keep staying in touch with the operations manager. I kept nudging him with emails. I actually went and had an in-person on-the-job interview where I went and met a tour that was in progress in Africa to show them how interested I was. And then finally, after being so annoying that I think finally he said, gosh, I just have to give this girl a job. So she started
me
emailing
alone.
me. I wound up on a tour in Madagascar for 2 months last summer.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. So it was difficult. It was challenging. It was way far out there, but wonderful. An amazing, amazing experience. And so I took the hiatus from travel nursing, came back after that, kind of collected myself and figured out what is my next move. I wound up in Grass Valley, California, again with a conventional sort of 3-month travel gig. And now I'm working, I've been there for 2 or 3 months already in Truckee, California, which is right outside of Lake Tahoe.
Tahoe.
Yeah. Working as a seasonal nurse in the emergency room in that hospital. It's called Tahoe Forest. So
Dealing with like ski injuries?
Ski injuries?
oh my gosh, we have a wrist fracture hall of fame in our ER, and it's full. We're going to have to put up another page because it's full. Yeah, we see a lot of ski injuries.
Sure.
Particularly this season because it's not a great snow year this year, but I don't know. It could still happen in March.
Yes.
So
Fingers crossed.
yeah.
Julie, thank you for asking that question. So speaking of physical things, I just found this out about you. You're like a longtime mountain biker. You mountain bike once, twice, 3 times a week on a pretty regular basis.
Yes. And that frequency has been more recently, but I started mountain biking probably 15 years ago.
And you are now preparing to prepare.
I'm preparing to prepare
For your first mountain bike race.
Yes.
What's the
Right
difference?
on, Julie.
What is the difference between going mountain biking and participating in a mountain bike race?
Well, so there's different kinds of
And why-
riding.
and why are you- why
why do I
now?
want to do this?
Why
Why now? Well, the type of mountain bike race that sounds appealing to me, because I'm not a strong climber, is called enduro, and they just time the downhill portion.
That sounds like cheating to me.
So you can take your time climbing.
I see.
Oh.
And
Do they have a ski lift that will take you to the top?
probably probably are some. And with enduro, you're not, my understanding is, I haven't done all my research, but you're not, elbowing people for trail space. You're just timed on your
I
own
see.
ride. And so the fastest time wins.
Okay.
So who is the nuttiest person out there is what they're measuring.
Right.
It is
exactly.
a little bit of a
Yeah.
thrill-seeking version of mountain bike racing.
Yes. So enduro's not quite like downhill is the really gnarly, full face mask doing really crazy stuff.
I
So
see.
there are different levels. Enduro, I'm sure, has crazy terrain also. But in my mind, this is something I would like to work up to. And I just learned about an organization called VITA in Colorado, and they have a rider to racer program for women. So
I'll put that in the exhibits.
okay. So I'm waiting for them to post their information so they'll recommend training schedules, nutrition, and then they'll also recommend which races are good to start and then work your way up to harder races.
So this sounds like an I wish to I did situation.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
It
I've been
does.
thinking about it for years. And this year I said,
Good for you.
I am going to do this.
I'm
That's
so
great.
impressed because I think maybe a corollary to turn I wish into I did is I'm scared of it. I should.
I completely believe in that. I find myself saying that all the time. It's like, I'm like, shit, I'm scared to do this. Mm-hmm. I need to do this.
Yeah, if it's uncomfortable. Like that yoga
Yep.
pose you can't stand to do is the one you should do.
That's the
because
one,
it's
yes.
Right.
uncomfortable.
Right. Totally.
Okay, so we've been dancing around this question long enough. Think of our poor listeners who want to know what is a remarkable life. Now, I want to actually preface this and distinguish this from I think a closely related question, which is what is a happy life? Because I think that and this is not only a personal belief, but this is informed by my background as a behavioral scientist, which is that happy has a particular term which is akin to pleasurable, so lots of positive emotions. And I think some people might think that a happy life is a remarkable life, but I actually think that they can be independent of each other. That often the things that make life remarkable are things that are uncomfortable, for example, and it's hard to be happy while you're uncomfortable. And so we're seeking the question to not what is a happy life, but what is a remarkable life.
I think that's an important distinction.
Yes.
So, Jill, answer the question. You're living one, so tell the world.
I kind of want to look back at my notes that I took when I was preparing for this, but a couple more of the phrases that were in which I tried to crystallize it come to mind, and I think one of them, this is kind of a sweet one, I guess. Remarkable connections make a remarkable life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that does relate to what you're talking about as far as discomfort, because sometimes your friendships, your relationships are, of course, pleasurable and they make you happy, but sometimes they're actually uncomfortable and you have to work at them and get through difficult times, whether it's a disagreement or a separation or who knows what.
Or just simply this is that you're going to disappoint people and people are going to disappoint you.
Yes.
Because you're different.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a great segue. We all probably have a different idea of what it means to live a remarkable life. And that's something that I agonized a little bit over as I was preparing for this, because a couple things. I'm a middle child, number one. So you tend to be a diplomat and kind of try to look at things from every angle and see things very fairly. I've been selected for jury duty 3 times in my life. I'm not talking about just like I got called to the courthouse. I'm talking
you sat on the jury.
Yes, 6 lawyers decided, ooh, she'll see my side of the story, and I could probably convince her. Yeah. 6 lawyers thought that, so I've sat on a jury 3 times.
And 3 of them are on one side and 3 are on the other side, adversarial. So they both think that they can convince you.
That's
funny.
Yeah, or at best thought, well, she's fair, and she'll look at both sides at least. Mm-hmm. And
that's a much better framing.
Yeah, right. I can get her. Better than that. But it speaks to, what is a remarkable life? I'm like, I don't know. Who am I to say? There's so many different things, and what's remarkable to me might not be remarkable to someone else.
It's in the eye of the beholder.
Totally. Which leads me to one of the things I wrote as one of my phrases was, it's when a bunch of other people tell you that you're living a remarkable life.
That's interesting. That's a good idea. I mean, I can see what you're saying. But again, those people are connecting with what you're doing and they're wishing that they could. Yeah. And some people might say, I don't want to go on those kinds of travels. So it's,
right.
Again, it's even in the eye of the person who is giving you the kudos for the remarkable life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because I'm pleased. I'm certainly pleased with the life I'm leading. And when I think about it, I think, okay, yeah, I'm doing okay here. But I hadn't really thought of myself so much as I'm living this remarkable life until Peter sent me the link to the podcast and said, this is your life.
Yes.
Your life is remarkable.
That's great. Yeah, I love that idea, right? So there's this it gets reflected back to you. Because, one thing about being human is our ability to adapt. Mm-hmm. And so the beautiful thing is we're good at adapting to bad things, right? So a change in circumstance for the worse feels really terrible in that transition, but you actually have this psychological immune system that helps you adapt to your new worse off situation. That's great that we can do that. Mm-hmm. It helps with aging, for example. But the other side of it is we're really good at adapting to positive changes in our life. And actually, we're even better at adapting to positive changes. So you get a new car, you get a fancier, faster, more comfortable, more luxurious car, and you're like, wow, this is great. And then 6 months later, you just sort of
you adapted.
You adapted to it. You're like, I want the faster,
this is
more
normal
luxurious
now.
thing. So
this is my new normal.
This is called the hedonic treadmill. So you're sort of constantly pursuing greater and greater pleasures and so on. So when it comes to so your first trip to Australia, it's just there. It's constant. You're like, wow, I'm in this new place. You're experiencing all these wonderful things. It's stretching you and so on. That feels really special. 15 countries later, it's still special, but you've adapted to so much of it. What happens is when there's someone else who looks in and can remind you, you're like, this is pretty good.
Gotcha.
Yes.
I agree. And I think that's fantastic to have because otherwise you can forget.
You can take it for granted.
You can take it for
That's
granted.
right.
You can, and that can be with just about anything that you have in your life. And it's, living in Boulder, I had to remind myself every time I crested Highway 36 and you see that view of Boulder, it's just pretty spectacular. Maybe most of our listeners haven't seen it, but you crest this hill and you can see the Flatirons and these beautiful mountain formations, and you can see Rocky Mountain National Park. And
it's a striking. There's a pull out, an overlook.
Yeah.
So many people
Right?
pull over to take photos.
It's one of those
Yeah.
places in the
It's
world.
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. And even though I decided to ultimately leave Boulder, I really tried to never lose my wonder that I was living in a really magnificent place. And I think that's really important to do. I think that can contribute to a remarkable life for sure, to continue to see. I didn't put this as one of my as one of my phrases, but I think maintaining your wonder is something that would contribute to a remarkable life for sure.
This is great.
Yeah.
Julie,
Well, and
you
similar,
did some homework.
I did. I have a few things, and we've touched on a couple of them.
I thought
in
so.
different wording, but what you just said about keeping your wonder, what made me think of one I wrote was being grateful, appreciating what you have, where you live, what you're able to do. Even if you don't have the means to live a remarkable life, how are you able to work within your means to have a remarkable life? So I felt like being grateful was one that was important. But when go ahead.
Oh no! Can I say something about gratitude?
Yes.
So I feel like I'm kind of wearing my behavioral scientist lab coat right now because you say something, I'm like, oh, there's a study about this.
Right.
So in the last 20 to 30 years, there's been this rise in what's called positive psychology. So psychology initially was very focused on the negative, on deviance, on depression and anxiety and mental health problems, and then just the difficulties it is to be human. And that makes a lot of sense. There's what's called a negativity bias. So negative things have a bigger effect on us than positive things. And Martin Seligman, who I'll talk about in a little while, really helped spearhead the growth of this area of psychology that was focused on not how do we alleviate suffering, but how can we actually enhance people's lives, help them live better lives. And some of the work has looked at gratitude, actually.
Okay.
And so my favorite study about this, so what you can basically do is if people who regularly express gratitude in their life are happier people. Right?
Scientifically proven.
Scientifically proven. Now, of course, people are wondering, well, how do I do that? So it's so some people naturally do it. They just take stock and they go, boy, today was a good day. The average person doesn't do that because, again, a negativity bias. The things that make in any one day, there are good things and there are bad things, and we tend to pay attention to the bad things. We pay attention to the traffic, and we pay attention to getting a parking ticket, and to the toxic worker, and so on, versus the times where the traffic was smooth, or you had a wonderful interaction with a patient or friend or whatnot. And so people do a gratitude journal. So if you prescribe someone a gratitude journal, and it's very simple, you do it at the end of the day, you write down 3 things that went well. And here's the critical thing, and why.
Oh.
3 things that went well and why. And people who regularly do a gratitude journal have this uptick in positivity in their life. Because one, it focuses them on the good things in their life. It's a nice reminder, like, oh, today was a pretty good day. And then the why leads to learning. Right? So now I'm it's not just happening, but when you say, well, why was that interaction with a patient so positive?
That's so interesting.
Right.
I'm so happy to hear this because I feel like, oh, good, I'm doing something right because I try to say thank you as much as I can when people do something good or nice, but and sometimes I'm like, Jill, shut up. Nobody wants to hear you continue to talk. But then sometimes I'm like, no, I need to tell them why I'm thankful for what they did, why it was good. So I'll say to a patient, I won't say, thanks for waiting. I'll say something like, thank you. I know you've been sitting here a really long time, and it's really hard to wait in the ER without getting upset. So thank you so much.
I'm like getting a little emotional just
That's
hearing that.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I really try to say, like, my flight attendant on my flight from Reno to here, this guy was unbelievable. He was the friendliest, most loving flight attendant I have ever had on a flight. And so I said that to him as I was walking off the plane. I said, thank you so much. You were the friendliest, most upbeat and positive. And he wasn't even annoying about it. He somehow did it without being annoying.
That's nice.
I said, you're the most friendly, upbeat and positive flight attendant I've ever had. Thank you so much. And I mean, the biggest smile on his face. So I think I'm so glad that there's some scientific evidence to back up that I'm doing something right in my life.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think, let's see, there was another thought I had about what you were talking about. Oh, yeah. The balance of positive and negative with gratitude and sort of recognizing things that are difficult. Mm-hmm. I think that what you just said touches on something so important because you really do have to sort of let yourself have your moments.
Sure, of course, yes.
Right.
Because things happen in life that aren't wonderful and they need to be managed or dealt with. But really, most people probably who are listening to this podcast are doing pretty well, have a roof over their heads and food in their belly
mm-hmm.
and an income.
They're trying to enhance.
Yeah, they're trying to enhance. Exactly. So really most of the time should be spent, I don't know. I don't want to tell anybody what they should do, but I think
we should be marveling at our good fortune. I'll say it.
Okay, thank you. Right.
We should be like, oh my God, I can't believe how good, how well this is going.
Yes.
Yeah, how well this is going. So, the real quick, and then we're going to get to your next thing, Julie, is there's this guy, he's like a former Navy SEAL. His name's Jocko Willenick. So Jocko's this big, burly, he talks like this. He's got this very deep voice. And, he's kind of a Navy SEAL turned kind of business guru, philosopher, whatever. He's got a podcast, a book, et cetera, et cetera. He has this thing, I think it works very well, especially within the military, because if you're in the military, things are going wrong all the time. You're mm-hmm. constantly being disappointed. There's constantly challenges and so on. And so he has he's trained himself to, when something bad happens, he says, good. So, you know what I mean? He's like, mission got canceled. Good. Gives us more time to train for the next mission. It's like sprained your ankle. Good. Time to work on your weaknesses, lifting weights and so on and so forth. And so, when you think about gratitude, it's first of all, we don't tend to be gracious enough. When we do, we focus on the good things, but think about how many bad things have happened in your life that end up in the long run being a blessing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad does a presentation and he quotes Captain Jack Sparrow, who says, the problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're talking about. If someone cuts you off in traffic, it's totally up to you how you want to react to that problem. And just let it slide and be happy. And, you have a car. Be grateful for that you can, you're not taking the bus or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think it ties into what you were talking about.
So I'll put there's like a little video I'll put in the exhibits of Jocko he does the good thing better than I do it. So I haven't exactly embraced that yet. Although my version of this is it's difficult to know the goodness or badness of something while it's happening.
Well, yeah,
that makes sense.
You don't know because you can't be having two different experiences at the same time, right? So how do you know that whatever quote unquote bad thing happened to you is better or worse than something else that might have happened to you had that situation not transpired? So
yes. And you might need 10 minutes. You might need 10 years again to know right? As you said,
Yeah.
think about your fax machine story.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you try to send the fax and it doesn't go through and you throw a fit. You know what I mean? Right. That kind of thing. And that's seen as a negative thing, as this blocking your progress versus
It's
it
cool.
changes the
I'll
course
just go to Colorado.
It changes the course of your life in some way. Again, you don't know what the experiment is, but you know that life has turned out pretty well.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Julie, what else do you have? So I if it's not obvious, I prepped these two that I was going to be asking this question, and they actually did their homework. So.
When you first asked the question, the very first thing that popped into my head, what is a remarkable life, is being nice to people.
Oh.
I wrote something like that too.
You and I have so many overlapping, but I just feel like if you're being nice to people, it's an energy and it's a happiness and you're exuding that. And it ties in too with what we were just talking about your attitude and how you treat people and how, Jill, you compliment people and you're going above and beyond being nice. You're being more than nice.
Oh.
And so I do think that that's an important part.
I think that's great.
Of
you two are way nicer than me. I don't even have anything like that on my list per se. But I have so this may resonate with Jill. If you press me, I would say, do no harm.
Oh, I have that. Yes. Those words are written here on my phone.
I think like this idea of, I think one of the beautiful things about the world, and it's really the premise for this podcast, is that there's not just one way to do it, right? That we've been dancing around this idea.
100%.
And so, but you can't do anything you want. I really don't believe you can do anything you want, because some things
absolutely not.
make
I totally agree with you.
Worse and harming people. Mm-hmm. And of course we can work hard to define the word harm and what does that mean.
Right.
But what you're suggesting is it's not the absence, it's actually trying to create positivity.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll just read the one that I wrote that totally goes along with what you said. A remarkable life is helping out when you can and trying not to make things worse for anyone else.
There you go. That
brings
you just both together.
Right.
That's funny. We didn't even know each other before we got in this room.
And I didn't want us sharing these in advance either. So the fact that there's some overlap, I think, is actually probably a good thing. Right. It means we're probably starting to circle something.
Crystallize.
Yeah.
Do you want to do another one, Julie, and then we'll get back to you, Jill?
Okay, I had intentional living, which is the same thing Jill said about instead of I wish, I did. Mm-hmm. I think that's intentionally, and I also think that's the difference between what is a happy life and what is a remarkable life, is being more intentional about doing exciting things, pressing against your comfort level, and so on and so forth. So that one overlapped. And this one overlapped as well. You said connections.
Remarkable connections.
And I said spending time with people who feed your soul.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's pretty wild. I think I could create a table and put yours next to each other. Like you're using different language, but
they were saying the same exact things.
Yeah. Great minds, Julie.
Yes,
minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Prioritizing passions, which is also kind of that intentional living, but making sure, for me, mountain biking is a passion. I've decided I'm not buying a ski pass next year because I would rather be on my bike, and I'm going to get a fat bike for next winter so I can still play in the snow, but on a bike, because that is my happy place.
So this came up in episode 1 where Julie has set, I'm very proud of her for this, where she set real boundaries in her dating life, which is I'm not mountain biking in order to do something with you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Right. So it's like we can go out afterwards. We can go the day before. We can go the day after. But I'm not canceling my mountain biking plans to go to lunch with some dude.
Exactly.
That probably won't be around. But the bike will.
Yes.
Yes.
My bike is loyal.
Joe, do you want to jump in? Do you have one more?
Well,
do you have 10 more? How many do you have?
How much homework did I do? Well, I have something to kind of add to that.
Please.
I think, as a single person, can do these things without, I mean, I guess I would think any relationship I'd get into, I'd want to make sure I could still do my passions. Because I think that's the only way I would want to be in that relationship. And I think that perhaps is why I'm still single, is because I do require lots of freedom and space to do the things I want to do. And, but I think any good relationship, you should be able to, you know, if, I don't know, I guess this is just a la Jill. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I'm no expert on it, but the guy would be like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. You're mountain biking today. That's awesome. I'll see you tomorrow. You know,
I don't attract those ones.
No, that's
Well, okay. So
I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah. I want to say is I also agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way I often say is this is a coordination issue. It's not a compromise.
sure.
Right? So we're going to coordinate,
Logistics.
but we're not going to compromise.
Mm-hmm.
But the world, you know, so when you have this dyad as the unit where it's two people come together and their lives become so enmeshed, well, that demands a level of compromise that some people are not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard. It's often hard to find someone who
Yes.
thinks in a non-traditional way.
It's interesting. It's tough to find a relationship with someone who values independence. Those are competing ideologies. So it's really like a matching thing too then. And then once you get in it, you coordinate the logistics, I guess. But to match with someone who values the independence as much as you do
Yeah.
while
And
seeking a relationship is tough.
I'm going to add something that was going to make the two of you uncomfortable, which is I can also imagine how difficult it would be for a guy who meets you. You know, you're funny, you're smart, you're successful, you're beautiful, you're active, you're like the total package. And so what happens is some guy comes along and he's like, oh my God. And then he just wants to keep this wonderful creature as close as possible. I don't want her getting far away.
High five, Jill.
And so it's like this thing where, you know, you actually need to have this comfort and confidence as a partner to be able to say, I'll see you on Tuesday. Go have fun. Mm-hmm. You know, because for the average person, it's hard to meet someone who's that exciting and fun and good company. And then it's also threatening to let them go off and fly around.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's been interesting,
Yes.
particular because one of my passions is swing dancing. It's partner dancing. And so not only are you going off, you're going off to hug a bunch of other guys for all night long,
Yes.
you know, and at the end of the night, oftentimes it turns to a blues dance, which is slow and sultry and kind of sexy. And it definitely can be a bit uncomfortable for a partner who doesn't do that. It's definitely a niche hobby. Not a ton of people do that.
Right.
Plenty of people do. But I don't necessarily want to date someone who dances. I mean, if he does, great. But if not, that's fine.
But he has to be okay with you
you dancing.
He
dancing.
has to be okay with me doing it.
So
Yeah.
you're okay. So Julie's version is the mountain biking, and your version is the swing dancing.
One of the versions.
Yeah, and mountain
Yes.
biking is, I mean, lots of women do it, but more men mountain bike than women. And
Sure.
I ride with both. And so there's that same, well, who did you ride with?
Right.
You know, I wrote, then you can just see the presumptions.
Yeah,
happening.
it can
Yeah.
be threatening, you know,
Yeah.
especially early on and so on. You're excited. You know, I mean, as a guy, you get excited. And so I could see how that can present a challenge, but I also understand rightfully why you say, nope, this is non-negotiable.
Well, and you've heard my Sheila, I call my bonus mom. She's my stepmom, but she's my bonus mom.
That's cute.
She's talked about this idea of compromise. And when you compromise, you're giving, neither side wins, right? You're giving something up. And the term she likes in a relationship is cooperation.
Yes. Okay.
So how
I
do
use
you-
coordination? Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
coordination, cooperation together to make it work for everybody.
I know. I'm a weirdo in some ways. Like sometimes I'm just like, well, we can go to separate movies if you want. Like it's not even that
Totally.
weird. Yeah.
I feel the same way.
I know that's like a bizarre thing for some, but like people listen to like separate movies or, you know, you just go, well, all right, I'm going to put on my lab coat again for a moment. And I'm hoping that this lesson will start to bring some of this stuff together. Okay. So I mentioned Martin Seligman earlier as the grandfather even of positive psychology. Mm-hmm. So one of the main areas of research in positive psychology is on what's called life satisfaction. Okay. So essentially, trying to measure the goodness of a life. And there have been traditionally, and what's interesting about it is both psychologists and economists have attempted to do this. And traditionally, the view was there were sort of two paths to a good life. Okay, two paths to a good life. One is pleasure or happiness. So on balance, how pleasurable is your life? And so you can imagine someone who has chronic pain has a less pleasurable life than someone who doesn't. Someone who can take a nap every day or has a great sex life or has, access to good, tasty food and, has a joyous family, friendships, things like that lead to a kind of more pleasurable or i.e. Happy life. And then the other one is meaning. So that people who are living a good life are pursuing meaningful pursuits. So these good, so parenthood is an obvious one that lots of people do, which is, helping to raise this thing into something that is non-embarrassing.
Spoken truly like a single man.
I was going to say, calling how some people aren't cat people? Pete's not a child person.
But it doesn't have to be parenthood. It could be curing cancer, fighting oppression, right? So any number of things that are purposeful in life and make the world in some way a better place. Now, those things are often not pleasurable. Like curing cancer is not pleasurable in the sense it's long hours in the laboratory, sleepless nights, puzzling over things. Fighting oppression is not, you know what I mean? Is not like afternoon delight. You know what I mean? Like it is hard ass work. And so the way this was sort of focused on was this sort of tension between pleasure and meaning, right? And so on. Now, what happened was Martin Seligman wrote about this and was kind of a person who pushed this idea along until rather recently. And he wrote this book called Flourish. I'll put it in the exhibits. And in it, he says, and this is something that a senior scholar rarely does, I was wrong.
Oh.
He said, I was
like
wrong.
This guy already.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So there's a saying in academia, it's attributed to Max Planck, which is that scientific progress happens one death at a time. The idea is that the big breakthroughs don't come from the most senior scholars. Those folks are entrenched in their beliefs. It comes from sort of like a mid-level person, someone who has enough experience to sort of be dangerous, but is not completely tied to the theories of the day. And in it, he says, there's not just two paths to flourish, as he says, or say a good life, or we might say a remarkable life. There's three other paths. So the first one, and he presents this as an acronym called PERMA, the PERMA model. So P is pleasure, and the M is meaning. So we've covered those two so far. The E stands for engagement. Okay, so engagement has a particular form. It's essentially creative problem solving. It's in many ways the artist way. So artistic endeavors, creative endeavors, and so on, which are challenging, but when they meet your ability level, so when your ability level and the challenge match up, you have this ability to be engaged in what's called a flow state. And a flow state is this sort of satisfying state where kind of time evaporates. And so this doesn't have to be writing or painting. It could be manipulating data as a scientist. It could be biking as it could be dancing where you have this enjoyable is a strong word, but this sort of satisfying moment where just the world kind of goes away and you're just in the zone, so to speak. R, and you two have touched on this, relationships. Okay, so relationships are a path to living a good life. Now, one thing that is very clear is this doesn't have to be a partner. So this could be community. Right. It could be, being part of a religious community, part of a group, it could be part of a group of friends and so on. And so, but being involved with relationships, close or disperse, is one of those paths. And then the last is achievement. And that's doing something that's very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
Building a business, winning gold medals, getting a PhD, things that are really challenging to do but are satisfying. Climbing a mountain is, it's not pleasurable. You're not really changing the world in any way. You might be doing it alone. It sits apart in that sense. And so one of the really cool things about the PERMA model is that it suggests that there is no one path.
That's why I couldn't crystallize it.
Right. PERMA is crystallizing it.
Well, right. But in PERMA, in 5 different phrases.
Yes.
And I, now I don't feel so bad that I couldn't crystallize it because this renowned scientist couldn't do it either. It's he said there's at least these 5 things that we have.
And so there's these things that are interesting about it. Is, so for example, you can't do them all at once. So to try to live a good life by doing each of those 5 things is impossible. It takes too much time, energy. As I said, some of them are negatively correlated. So if you want to live a pleasurable life and a life of achievement,
good luck,
right?
Right.
So Michael Phelps wins, I don't know how many gold medals. Was his life pleasurable while he was doing it? No, he's spending 6 hours a day in an ice cold pool swimming. If you guys think that's easy, go jump into a cold pool and do 3 laps and think about how hard that is.
No, thank you.
Yeah, really.
And yet if you said to him, you can't train today, would he be relieved and happier? No, he would be less happy, right? Because he's not doing the thing that he's tuned in to do. The other thing is that whether you're you can imagine putting weights on these things, so some people they're a solo artist, they spend a lot of time alone. They're making something. They're never becoming famous for it. They may work in their damp, cold studio. And so they're very focused on that engagement. And then you contrast that with, a woman who's a mom who has left her career to raise these children. And you ask them to switch spots, they're both worse off. And so not only is it that you can't do them all, they're not easily interchangeable. And that they may rise and fall at different parts of your life.
Right. And then with your artist example, heavily involved in the engagement part of creating a painting, once it's complete, then does that move it into the achievement?
Not necessarily.
Phase? I mean, again, achievement is sort of in the eye of the beholder, right? Because other people can look at you and say, well, that's a big achievement. But if you feel like it is or isn't.
Yeah. I mean, again, they can complement one another. And so for example, creative endeavors often benefit from having positive emotions, being well rested and so on. But it doesn't have to be, right? So again, there are artists who create because not for the final product, but because they must create.
The process.
The process is there. But you can be Stephen King and have the process and become a millionaire, multimillionaire, and have both together.
It's interesting. In the movie, I just saw this movie on the plane, Ford v. Ferrari. Did anybody see that?
I'm familiar with the premise of it, yes.
So it's about race car drivers. And there was one moment where someone said, as they were recognizing people, he said something to the effect of, they can't not do this. This guy can't not race cars. They can't not build cars. They can't not try, spend hours and hours making this car the fastest car in the world. So that phrase, I think, goes along with what we're talking about. And it's really interesting because I feel like there's such a fine line between being happy and doing something meaningful. Because I don't know if the people who are engaged in that endeavor and maybe seeking that achievement, doing that work, it could be lonely, but they can't not do it.
Yes.
That maybe
their calling.
That is their happy place, even though it doesn't.
It's not biologically pleasurable.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that the pleasure has this sort of biological element to it. Mm-hmm. And I just think that people get themselves into trouble thinking that they should be pursuing pleasure.
Uh-huh.
And indeed, some of us should. Like, some people are just wired that way. They're a bit more hedonistic. Mm-hmm. But what I always say to folks is, well, if you want to look to see what are the hints at your remarkable, this is what we've been talking about. It's not what is a remarkable life. It's what is your remarkable life. Mm-hmm. And that it would be a mistake for someone to try to live Jill's remarkable life or Julie's remarkable life. And so you go, okay, well, what is it? Well, what I say is, look backwards in order to look forwards. What are the things that you just constantly finding yourself doing, even though you go, why am I doing this? You know, and so like for me, it's always been making something, doing something, creating something, bringing people to, like, what are we doing tonight after this?
We're going to dinner and a comedy show.
Yes. I brought 6 people together, not everybody who knows each other, to do this pleasurable activity, but also has this kind of relational element to it. So this is my day. This is a typical day for me. I got up this morning. I worked on my podcast and did some writing. I met up with Julie. We had a nice brunch. We went on a hike. We're creating a podcast now. I'm bringing people together for more pleasure, laughs, enjoyment, and conversation. I've been doing that since I was 20 years old.
You're such a slacker, Peter.
And I wonder, and I'm like, why am I so stressed out? Why am I doing all this stuff? I don't need the money. You know what I mean? I wonder, and I go, it's just because I'm compelled.
You can't not do it.
I can't not do it. I can't. Every time I try to, I take something off my plate, I just put something else back on.
Mm-hmm. But then you'll be intentional about what stays on your plate.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get ruthless when I need to. So I'm not offering the PERMA as an alternative to your ideas, but I think what you can do is you can start to fit, right? So you can start to fit, like, be nice to people suddenly fits into this relational category and into this pleasure category. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of having remarkable connections, as you said, it fits into the R and so on. And then, this idea of challenging yourself, whether it be turning a rider into a racer, takes this thing and turns it into a moment of potential achievement.
Right.
You can see how this stuff starts to kind of coalesce around not, oh, you should do this, but learn to know. First of all, I guess the thing is it's very difficult for someone who's living their good life that takes some balance of these acronyms and tell you that you should be living the same exact life.
I 100%, I'm not sure if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you. I agree with you that, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't impose our remarkable life on anyone else, because I think, it was funny. The other day I was reading an article in National Geographic, I think. They did a documentary. Maybe we all saw it at the Oscars, about the young Syrian female doctor whose hospital got blown up in Aleppo. So what did she do? She went into the caves, like the underground tunnels, and saved thousands of children over the course of the years that she worked there as a doctor. Any doctor in those circumstances, it would be difficult, but she was a female doctor in Syria. So it was even more remarkable. And I kind of thought, what am I doing on this podcast?
Will you give me her email address, please?
We're gonna scrap this one and get her on the show. But then and then at the other end of the spectrum, I was traveling. Let's see.
Wait, can I say something?
Yeah,
I really
sure.
think so. I think that's I actually, one of the things that of course, I would love to have Whoopi Goldberg or Mindy Kaling on this podcast. People who are solo, who are living these amazing kind of lives. But actually, I want people like you two on here because the average person listening is never going to have Whoopi Goldberg's life.
Right.
And so the idea that this is within grasp, within reach, I think is actually important.
Yeah. And I kind of had to give myself a break. The average nurse is never going to do what this woman did. But is it okay? Is it enough that I'm making my little corner of the world not worse for anyone else, hopefully, and that I would extend that to lots of people who I meet? And I thought of this example of this security guard who I met when I was traveling in Mexico. And when I travel, I try to practice my Spanish. I try to have as many conversations as I can because I feel like that it makes me a better nurse when I come back. You get to meet a huge variety of people. You get to provide entertainment for the locals who will laugh at your terrible grammar. I mean, it's a win-win-win situation. So I chatted with this guy every night for a week, probably, at this, cabanas that I was staying at. And he was so nice. And I asked him during one of these conversations, hey, so what else do you do besides work as a security guard here at night? And he said, well, I said, what do you do on your days off? And he said, well, I work here every day. And I said, oh my gosh, well, what about during the day then? And he said, well, when I leave this job in the morning, I go to another hotel and I clean the pools there. And then I go home and I sleep for a little bit. And then I come back here and I do this job. And I almost started crying because I thought my next questions to him were, well, when do you see your friends? And how do you have a girlfriend? Or have you ever been to a party? Or, what do you do for yourself for fun? And I was so distressed about this. And he looked at me and he said, don't worry, it's okay. I'm okay. I left Mexico City as a child. My parents couldn't pay for us to go to school. So I didn't get an education, but I got myself to a much nicer place here. And do you see these boots I'm wearing? I bought these boots. I bought them myself. And these jeans. You're going to make me
cry right now.
I know. I definitely cried. I bought these jeans. So don't worry about me. I'm okay. And one of the other phrases that I wrote was something to the effect of, I can't remember exactly what it was, but a remarkable life is when you're always trying to improve yourself. And I didn't want it to sound too self-helpy.
Right.
But what I meant was that, have these conversations and be open to, for me, the improving myself was, speaking Spanish so that I could, be a better nurse at work and get to know more people and have that inform my perspective, be a better person by getting to know other people and learning about what else is out there and how many different things are happening in this world. It can only make me a better person. But I guess what that particular conversation made me recognize was there's all kinds of remarkable lives happening. And sometimes it's just someone getting out of bed and going to work every day and going home.
And wearing the clothes that they bought.
That was his remarkable life.
Yeah. This, so I have, this will have, I think it'll be subsequent to this one, but I've already taped an episode with Charlie Merrill, who's a physical therapist, and we talk about pain and injury, and we spend a little bit of time talking about working out to look good naked. and what I say is, like, we should not be aspiring to have the body of an Instagram model. What we should be aspiring to do is have the best body that we can have, with all our flaws and all our challenges and whatever that may be.
Sugar addiction.
And so on. Yes. and this is, this is reminiscent. That's not just for your body. It's like we should be trying to live the best life that we can live within the challenges and circumstance, that we have.
And as good people to recognize that might look different for everyone.
Yes. Okay. So I want to do a couple listener questions before we turn to the bonus material. And we have to be a little tasky because we have people arriving for food and drink prior to our comedy show. So we have 2 questions that have been submitted. Julie, do you want to do the first one?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is from Steve in Colorado. And
this is a different, we've already had a listener question from Steve.
Okay,
This is a different Steve. Different Steve.
And this is a follow-up question from episode 2.
Okay.
Which talked about the discrimination basically against solo people in various ways. So he says, when someone at work says, since you're the single one, you should take this extra work on. What is a good response to that?
So my first cheeky response is, will you please put that in an email?
I don't know what more I could say. I think that's fantastic.
Right.
There is if you can pull it off, it's not a bad way to have someone go, oh,
yeah,
maybe I shouldn't be using that logic.
Right.
Because it's naturally discriminatory.
Yeah,
right.
Would you sign your name to it?
Yeah.
Right. But you might have to help them get there. They might not put that together.
That's so interesting. Mm-hmm. Like, imagine you say, oh, will you put that in an email? And someone goes, sure, why not? Because
they don't even get it.
Because, yeah, if the go-to just belief system is, you do have the extra time because I have this special thing that is off limits. It may take a moment of re-educating, I suspect.
Right. So you could just say, no, I'm not available. Or is this an opportunity to educate?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like your suggestion is, can you put that in an email? But okay.
I'm not sure. It depends on the relationship with the person.
Okay.
I am joking mostly when I say that.
So if you don't have the cojones to say that, what would be, do we want to educate these people or just say, no, I'm not available? Or what do you think?
Jill?
It's a great question. It's interesting.
Has it happened to you?
Here's the thing. I think nurses have a strong sense of justice. And so even when people want to do that, it gets quickly shot down. Like, I've definitely seen situations where that dynamic has gone full circle in a matter of 5 minutes.
Okay.
Where someone will kind of suggest it that, well, maybe she'll do it because she's single, or he'll do it because he doesn't have kids, or something like that. Usually it's about kids more so than being single.
I could see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
People feel like they don't have any trouble. Here's the thing. You should be able to leave work for any reason that is in your conscience is something that you need to do. But generally speaking, no one's afraid to say, I need to leave work because my kid is sick. No one would fault you for it.
Right.
But a single person doesn't have that equivalent where they can, or someone without kids doesn't have that equivalent, where I needed to leave work once because I was traveling somewhere and I needed to get a yellow fever vaccine. And that was the only time I could do it, was like these 2 hours where I was at work and I couldn't get coverage. And here's the thing, you are allowed to sort of call off work a certain amount of times for any reason. And no one's allowed to really ask why you're doing it. So I had to do that, but I was so hesitant to tell anybody why I was doing it.
Right.
I didn't see it as valid a reason as someone who was saying, my kid is sick and I have to pick them up from school. I was like, well, I don't want to get yellow fever when I go to Africa.
Yeah.
So, and this is the only time in that window of time before I have to leave for the trip where the office is open and I can get the vaccine done. But I didn't feel comfortable saying that at all, even though it was quite valid.
Mm-hmm.
So
do we want to educate people? Back to Steve's
It's
question.
a good question.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to say one thing is this is when I don't have children, obviously, Julie, you have a daughter.
I do.
I think like when a parent says, "I have to go home, my child's sick," no one goes, "I envy you." No one ever goes, "Lucky."
No one says, "I wish," and then I did.
And so,
get a sick kid too.
that is, boy, it seems like a really valid excuse. Like, that's there. I mean, not that anybody envies having to get a vaccination. I have to say it's an interesting puzzle. I think it's an interesting puzzle where there's a sort of moment in time that I think it's a delicate situation, again, because the person may not realize, again, because it's like, what's the saying about, there's two fish in a bowl, and someone's like, one of them says something about the water, and the other one goes, "What water?" It's just, it's so around you that it's not even something that you even consider.
Right.
And so that could be you could be fighting a pretty uphill battle with that. Or it could be someone who has, they'd have progressive views about other things, and then they just go, "Oh yeah, I see. Sorry about that."
Okay. So
I think it depends on what he
still
wants.
Do we educate people?
Do you just say, "I'm not able to do it either,"
and leave it at that?
Or you say, "I'll do this one and you can do the next one," like that. So now it's quid pro quo. It's a tit for tat. It's equal.
Yes.
We're each going to do this at some point.
Yes.
I'm going to do it this time. You're going to do it next time. You're not going to get off from this.
Right.
Or you just say, "Hey, we are doing the same job. And just because I don't have a family doesn't mean that my free time's not valuable to me."
I like that. Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit of personal style is my reaction.
Sure. And I think it's nice sometimes if you have a policy to back it up that is provided by your employer, because I think most employers have an employee handbook that spells out the time off that you're allowed to take and not allowed to take and whatnot. And I think what was discovered was that in our handbook, it does say you get this many days off or hours off, and you don't have to give a reason. So, yeah, I guess if you were shy about directly educating, you could say, "Hey, I'm just going by the manual."
Hold on. I'm actually starting to get angry as I think about this. I can't believe that we're having to debate this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I can't believe they're like, "Well, how much do you want to stir the pot or whatever?
How delicate should I be?
How delicate should you be?" Like the reverse of this would be Steve says, "You have nothing else to do. You're stuck with a family. You should do it. I have this rich, vibrant social life. I've got this to do. I've got this to do. I've got pottery class. I've got to do this, all these kinds of things. So really, you don't have anything else to do. So you should probably do it." That's the flip side of this.
Right.
In a sense.
Totally. It's funny. I think Julie and I talked about this before. I really enjoyed the guest you had, I can't remember her name, but on the science of single living.
Yes, Bella DePaulo.
Yes, where she said, "What if we reversed all the statements?" And I said the same thing to Julie at the beginning, and I said, "I guess I could say to this person, well, because I'm single, I am more interconnected socially, and I have a lot more
I have friends who are counting on
with
me.
Other people, yes, who I'm very important to, and they're very important to me. So I definitely can't do it because I am even more connected than someone who has a family." It
is interesting. I mean, I have this saying about being unapologetically unattached, and that's where, like, this is where I'm starting to get a little bit, like, hot under the collar. I mean, again, these are repeated transactions, right? This is, and so you're working with this person. And so I think some diplomacy is probably useful because it's a teachable moment. And because you're setting expectations for the future and so on. I just want to say that I think it's funny that we're sort of dancing around. Oh, well, we don't,
right?
That kind of thing. All right, let me do. Did you have?
That was it. Nope,
okay. So this one is actually from a married person.
Okay.
This is from Terry, who is a listener.
The perimeter has been breached.
Yeah. So Terry says, "I am married and I love the podcast. As someone who is partnered, how can I support my solo friends?"
Oh, Terry, I love you. Oh, my God.
Isn't that sweet?
Yes.
Yes.
That is so sweet.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. Invite us to go with you. Don't assume we don't want to go just because there's going to be couples there.
Yeah, I think Bella talks about this. Like, the single friends get Tuesday night, but the married friends get Saturday night. If I remember correctly.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I love going to my friends' kids' soccer games because it's like going to another planet. I get dropped into this world that is so different than anything I normally exist in. And it is fascinating and I really like it. So don't not invite us to stuff because you assume we wouldn't want to go. We want to be engaged and we want to be involved and we want to check out interesting stuff. We can always leave if it's not great.
I think that's a good one. I have one too. I want to hear yours, Julie. Do you have
Well,
one?
I was thinking along those lines of that there's sort of that negative connotation of, oh, well, you probably don't want to be the third wheel or something like that. And again, that kind of goes back to those bias of because I'm solo.
I'm a great third wheel. I'm a great fifth wheel. I'm a great seventh wheel.
I was going to say the same thing. Right. I've had lots of practice and I can do 19th wheel like nobody's business.
Well, and it's, again, back to this bias. It's said like, oh, poor you, you're going to be reminded that you're solo because you're the third wheel with a couple. And it's like, no, I don't necessarily want to be in your shoes. So I'm happy to just be carefree and experience a new activity or whatever it might be.
Okay, so don't assume.
Don't assume.
Don't assume.
I'm agreeing.
I think so. I'm going to add one here, which is, and so this is. I don't get this much anymore. People have given up on me, but I'd try to be aware of the kind of questions that you ask a solo person. And so the story I like to tell, and I wish I could, if you are the person who told me the story, will you please tell me who you are so I can attribute it to you? But is this woman, she goes home for the holidays and she's talking to one of her aunts. And her aunt's like, oh, honey, how's it going? And she's, oh, it's great. I just got a promotion at work. And then I have this trip planned to, South America. And, I just joined this new gym and all this kind of thing. And I've been volunteering, right? And so this woman describes what we would, by all accounts, say is a remarkable life. And her aunt says, oh, that's really nice. But is there a special man in your life? And the woman's like, are you listening to me?
Right.
Right. You know what I mean? Like and so, recognize that person may not have the same values that you do. And just assuming that this, which might be an important priority for some people in their perma, might not be for that. That's what, you two are looking at me like, oh yeah, I've been there.
Right.
I've been there and wished I had said, I'm the master of thinking of the great thing to say after
the
it's
fact.
over. But she could say something like, oh, there's hundreds of special men in my life. What time is it? Oh, I have a date with one of them in 5 minutes. I gotta go.
That's really funny. Well, that's good. I enjoy these Q&A. So if you're a listener, please contact me via social media or somehow via email and send them my way, and we'll do our best to get them on the air. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up right now. I'm going to thank you two and bring this to an official close. But if people want to stick around afterwards for the bonus material, we're going to talk about Pete's principles for living solo and living remarkably. But so, Julie, thank you for coming back and co-hosting again.
Thank you. I love doing this. It's fun.
And Jill, many thanks for saying yes to this for your first ever podcast and believing that you are indeed worthy of appearing.
Thank you so much. It definitely goes along with that doing things that make you uncomfortable as part of your remarkable life.
Jill's sweating right now. That's great. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, we are back with our bonus material. Julie and Jill are still here. They did not decide to leave after that.
I almost ran out of the room.
We actually got up and aired out our butt sweat.
These plastic chairs.
So this one's going to be a brief one. But one of the things that so we were talking about perma earlier. And for me, one of those paths to flourishing, to living a good life is the engagement. And this has happened in the last, I'd say, 10 years of my life, especially as a writer, where I've really embraced writing. And as I've gotten better at it, I have more opportunities where I can be kind of transported. And so I've taken my writing so seriously because it's had this profound positive effect on my life. I actually I have an entire chapter in my forthcoming book dedicated to writing. And so what I started to realize is I should start writing my ideas down around this podcast. So I've been speaking them a lot, and I should actually start to write them down. And one of the things that I thought would be like, it'd be nice to have kind of themes or principles to help guide my thinking and listeners' thinking in terms of making decisions to move yourself closer to that remarkable life. And so I just jotted a few of them down, and I want to run them by you, and I just want to get your reactions to it. And I think what you're going to find is some of them might be already related to some of the stuff we've talked about.
Okay.
So the first one, and this comes up in episode 1, is make a team. Build a team. And so because you don't have that one person who is your everything, I don't see that as a negative thing for a solo person. Is now you just pick the people.
You diversify.
Well said. And so building a team. So, that one of those teammates might be, and we're going to have a podcast about this, your barber might be that person, or a therapist. So I'm going to be doing an episode on how to pick a therapist. So
that's a good one.
It's a great one. I actually had a guy who, a young man from St. Louis, email me and say, because of your podcast, I'm going to get a therapist. Which, like,
cool. That is amazing.
I know. I was like overwhelmed by that.
Talk about crying.
I know. Seriously. Like, so you think about mental health issues in this country, especially with men, to have a man go, I think my life would be better if I got a therapist. But then they go, how do I get one? And I go, that's a good question. I'm going to find that out. So I like this idea of building a team, friends, professionals, family, and so on, to help guide you, whether it be decision-making, whether it be whatever it is, information, and so
Finances.
on. Finance. Money Amy has been a very popular episode.
Yeah.
I have an appointment with her next week.
I think I should get a kickback. I think Money Amy's going to do a lot of work.
It's funny. I have my version of Money Amy, and it's because I was Boulder does this thing called Dancing with the Boulder Stars, and it follows the same format as the real show, and it raises money for the YWCA, and they asked me to be a professional dancer in it, and I got paired with a financial planner.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Yeah. And so he was my Boulder star, and I was the professional, and we did a routine. And then afterwards, so because I was out there living my remarkable life and doing the things I was inspired to do, and I wound up with a financial planner out of the deal. You know, living your remarkable life has unforeseen positive consequences. But yeah, he offered to be my financial advisor after that. So
okay, so that was first one, make a team. These aren't in no particular order, but that was the one that came to mind because it came up. So the next one is to live on your edge, to seek to stretch yourself.
Oh, yeah. One of my phrases was something to the effect of, and we didn't get to it during the podcast, but it was on the fine line between courage and stupidity is where you live a remarkable life.
That's very close. Wow.
AKA the edge.
Yes, to be on your edge. So you're beyond your edge. You're anxious. You're in danger. You're in trouble. Life is not good.
You've done something stupid.
Yeah.
Yes. You're too far away from your edge. You're bored.
Right.
You know, and so we want to seek to live on your edge. And one way to get to your edge is, are you scared of something? Mm-hmm. Lean into it.
Yes. Be courageous.
Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm. But don't be stupid.
The next one is to have a growth mindset. This belief that you're never a finished product. So I think a lot of people have this false belief that when I X, everything will be okay. When I graduate, everything will be good. when I retire, that's when life will be good, and so on. And this idea that you're never going to be finished. You're never going to be complete, and you're just going to be trying to grow along the way.
Yeah. As a nurse, the scariest nurses to work with are the ones who think they've learned everything and mastered everything because they did this one class or they have worked this many years. So I think, well, I definitely agree with that professionally, and then of course in life in general. But yeah, it's actually those people really scare me who think they're done.
Mm-hmm.
So Carol Dweck is a psychologist who's done work on what's called, makes a differentiation between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset person says, I'm shy, and they just believe they're shy. A growth mindset person says, I'm shy, but if I wanted to be, I can learn to be less shy, And so what happens is that, you embrace situations in a different way when you're in a growth versus fixed mindset. You pursue change and so on. And so, so for example, a growth mindset, so a fixed mindset person thinks an intelligence test is a competition. Okay, well, let's see who's smart and who's not smart. A growth mindset person sees an intelligence test as a baseline. Well, let's see how smart I am right now, with the goal that I can become smarter. And so I like that. I like that idea a lot. All right, the next one, and this one Julie has heard this a lot from me, is create more than you consume. All right, so the average person consumes much, much more than they ever create. And so, so you think like the ratio is like 1 to 30, creating to consuming. For every 1 hour they're making something, there's 30 hours that they're consuming something. And what I want to do is try to push people to at least shrink that and ideally flip it. And so the idea is that when you can make things, and I realize that this might be a little bit more focused on the E people in the PERMA, that consuming has this thing of it forces you to grow. It can teach you to achieve a flow state, but now you also have something. Like consumption is often it's there and then gone, but when you create something, now you were alluding to this earlier, Julie. You now have a painting for the wall, or you have a memoir,
right.
Or you have a journal that you can go back and look at. It's there. No reactions to this one.
What have been your reactions to it before when you've heard it?
Well, I feel Pete creates a lot.
Yeah, so I feel like I might be a little bit biased with this one.
Possibly. And then I look at my own life and ask, I don't create in the same ways that Pete does, but how do I create?
Hold on. Okay, wait. I have the answer to this. Julie has recently started a Facebook group called Carpe Diem.
Yes.
For solos in Denver.
Yes.
That is an act of creation.
Indeed. Yeah.
So you
and I wouldn't even recognize that as that, but you're right.
You've created this group. You curate the group. You make plans for the group, right? So you're not just showing up to things. You're like, who wants to go skiing on this day? Who wants to go to this? Like,
right.
See, sometimes we need someone else to tell us that we're living remarkable lives.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. No, you're not writing, or you're not painting, or not sculpting, or making music, or something like that. But you still make stuff.
I do, and I think that I make things more in a...
You've built business
sense, right? I was going to say, I create more in...
You've built and sold 2 businesses.
Yes. There's a little bit of creating.
Just a little bit.
Entrepreneurship fits into the E as much as it does the A.
Yes.
It's not that you're just making this thing to sell and become rich, but it's the act of the day in and day out problem solving that's there.
Right. And I also think about myself as a consumer, and I think mainly of that in terms of media when you say consume.
Yes.
I don't watch the news because that's a whole nother story, but it's just fear-based, and I'm an empath, so it's hard for me to see a lot of that. I don't want to know all the bad things going on in the world, so I don't watch the news. I rarely watch TV, not because I wouldn't enjoy it, but I know I will get sucked into it.
Sure.
And so I don't consume a ton of media. I spend some time on Facebook and things like that, but so I don't know what my ratio would be. It would be interesting to really think about it.
And I don't think it's a matter of you have to
score. You don't need to score yourself.
But the idea is when given a choice on a Saturday afternoon or a Friday night or a new project, is it going to be something that you're going to let someone else create and you're going to consume it, or are you going to make something yourself?
And just to be more aware of it.
Yeah.
I admire your self-control. And as part of the remarkable life, trying to improve yourself, it is these days, especially, a lot of it is resisting the easy path.
The temptation, yes.
The temptation to consume.
Consuming is easy, creating is difficult.
It's difficult. And so I don't know exactly what my ratios are either, but I'm definitely trying to shift them in the direction you're talking about, Peter. Like, for instance, recently, I love writing also, and I've decided to write more. And
that's great.
If I have some thoughts about something, how would I organize my thoughts about it? And I think lately, maybe in the past couple of years, I've written at least like 3 or 4 pieces for no reason except just to write them, and I just have them. But it was time spent creating rather than consuming, even if no one else is ever going to read these things.
Right. Yeah. So again, the process versus the outcome.
Yes.
Right.
All right, the last one, and this came up in episode 3. People must be listening to this being like, God, I got to listen to
Episode
these
3
other episodes.
is comic, the superheroes.
Why are superheroes single?
That's right.
And I fussed with this idea in the episode, and it stuck with me. And it's be the director of the movie of your life. So there's a saying about, are you the hero in the movie of your life? But I like this idea of being the director of the movie of your life. That is, you happen to life. Life doesn't happen to you. And so when you think about what a director does, a director has total control over a movie. And so they put the hero in the situations. And so I like that idea of oftentimes what happens is the hero is just going along in life, and then something comes and knocks him or her out of their rut, so to speak. Well, that's an outside thing that does that. When you're the director, you get to choose the outside thing. And so I think about Jill, for example. In the episode, you talked about making this decision, right? Hearing about this person going to Australia and you saying, why not me? And so that's a very much of a director's choice rather than the traditional heroic choice. And so it's a fun one.
I love that concept too. And that when I heard it in that episode, it resonated with me. And I realized I have been getting better about being intentional, not only about how I spend my time, but who I spend my time with. And that's like what you said, is you're writing these chapters. If somebody is bringing drama and not value, and then they can be written out of your book. And
the character dies off.
Look, think about, why is Game of Thrones so exciting to watch? Is because they kill off characters, even beloved characters. And so you're just like, well, what's going to happen this week? That's a director taking control.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point being, you write into your life who you want to spend time with, who brings joy, who feeds your soul, and things like that. And so not only about the activities and being intentional in being creative instead of consuming and things like that. It just, that idea goes across every aspect of your life.
That's neat.
And the only thing I would add to that, I guess, would be with some flexibility also, because for example, I don't know, I guess when I graduated from my master's in English, I really wanted to go teach English in Spain. And I didn't get a job in Spain, but I got a job in Turkey teaching English. And so I kind of said, all right, I guess I'm going to Turkey then. And so I don't know.
I don't know.
Fair. I think that goes along with it, but not quite, because I'm still doing the thing. Teaching.
I think the metaphor still works.
Yeah.
And here's why, is because directors have budgets. Right, because they have to, there's still a producer who provides budgets, and And the director also has to direct the cast that he or she is given. Mm-hmm. And so there are still constraints and limitations and things that happen that...
And maybe the best directors are given a situation, they're willing to kind of work with it and change the plan slightly if need be.
That's right, to make the best of this. Yeah. Again, I just like this idea of you happen to life.
Sure.
As much as you can. I mean, you never know what's going to happen there.
Right.
So I'm going to keep working on these principles and trying to put them down on paper and develop them, and we'll see what happens with them. All right. Okay. Bonus material is coming to a close. This is one of our fastest yet, so I'm kind of pleased. And with that, I want to thank Jill again. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Peter, for having me.
Thank you for stretching yourself.
Happy that it's over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really happy that we did this. Thanks for having me.
And Julie, as always, you know how much I value your friendship beyond this podcast.
Thank you.
So,
ditto.
Cheers to both of you.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.